Well, good evening all. Welcome to this evening's licensing meeting. Before I officially get the meeting going, can I ask my learned friend on the left, say a few housekeeping things. Lucy, up to you.
Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and is streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premise must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking.
Thank you, Luce. That's very kind. Can I ask for any substitution?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Lucy Hodgson.
Being none others. Any declaration of interest? Lucy.
I'm a member of the, just recently appointed a member of the bid.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Pete. Anybody else? Did I miss? No. I understand that it's public personation.
Yes, Chair, we have Mr. Mohammed to address the committee.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Sada. You, I think you've been here before and you're familiar with the territory. You have a, between you, I think it's 5 minutes, so please, floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Good evening. Can you all hear me? Councillors, good evening. Hope you're all okay. I couldn't attend the last meeting with Niall because I had my daughter's graduation on the Tuesday in November, I think it was. I do apologise, but I did email Niall. The main concerns are we've got a few issues in the trade, but the main one is now that it's been about 5-6 years, I think, you councillors are probably aware that there not being a tariff increase in the trade. So I sent a proposal, I emailed it to Niall. I don't know if he's emailed it across to you guys. It hasn't gone up, we have not had it, and everything else around us has gone up in the trade. Fuel costs have gone up, to run a car it's really expensive. So I proposed a 550 for tariff one and time and a half 650. I think it should be a bit more than this. For some reason, and nobody's interested in giving us this increase. But I think from now on, you councillors and members and enforcement and licensing should do it automatically on the trade's behalf. Because if you move with inflation and everything else, I think it should be implemented in that way now. Because from the trade, nobody's actually put this increase for 4 or 5 years. We've not had nothing, but everything around us has risen and it's rising. Fuel will be about £2 this time next year, the way it's looking. So I think if you members really appreciate it, if you could really go ahead within the next couple of months to implement it and give us this fair increase, I think it's justifiable. We do need it because the trade has been hit heavily. You have to work hard 3-4 times as hard. You have to do 12 to 14 hours a day to get anything, but minimum wage is around £9–10 an hour. A lot of the drivers are doing 2 and 3 jobs. They're gone into factory work, they're gone into parcel deliveries, they're doing deliveries with other establishment, other companies. The ranks are empty in the afternoons. because no one's interested. The Hackney drivers are only working at the weekends. And on top of that, you got the traffic. It's horrendous. On the rank, I don't think Pat Agar's here. I actually picked her up last week myself. She was stood on the rank for half an hour. For me to come off the cross, the public wouldn't let me out. And she actually witnessed this. So all of you guys need to ask Pat what's going on. Or you can make your way into town on an afternoon every day of the week from 2 o'clock till 7 o'clock and you'll witness how bad the town is. Gridlock traffic. From bushwhackers onwards, for the last 20 years since I've been a cabbie, it's never been implemented by the police because they haven't got resources. So be it a few years ago when my colleague Raja Hussain mentioned by bushwhackers, if he had put a barrier there, we wouldn't have this pollution and all this traffic in town. Only for access people, it should have been, but yet nothing was done back then. So I really appreciate it if you could get these couple of things done for us. Thank you very much.
I'm sure that you're familiar with it. We'll take this forward and one officer will be in touch with you, I'm sure, in the near future. But it is down to the trade to put the application in and we'll look at that. It's no problem. Thank you for your time. Unless your colleague does want to add anything. I don't think he came in late, didn't he? So, okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes, colleagues, could you give me some hands of page by page, anything on the minutes? Going across. I take it that your silence is saying yes, agreed. Can we have just a show of hands just to implement that? Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Which neatly brings me to Richard. It's, I think your quality. Yes, please. And I think it's going to be a double act. I think Lloyd's going to sort of come in a little bit in there. So over to you, Richard, please.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thanks for welcoming me here this evening and come and give you a brief overview of air quality in the city centre. I'm just going to cover the headlines for the air quality status part of the report. Members are aware the Environment Act 1995 places obligations on the City Council to review and assess air quality and address any exceedances of government set quality objectives for 7 main pollutants. Fortunately, in Worcester, we've only got an exceedance of 1 gas, and that's nitrogen dioxide. That's an exceedance of the annual average level for NO2, which is 40 micrograms per metre cubed. Greatest contributor of this is road vehicles. So this report compromises of a short-term 4-year cycle and a long-term overview of 20 years for the city with regard to nitrogen dioxide. Short-term element of it is covered in section 3.1 to section 3.5 of your report. In air quality terms, short-term monitoring has been turbulent due to very mild winters. Concerns also raised with our laboratory and the change of laboratories as a consequence of a change with COVID infection. Trend analysis over this period confirmed that the overall levels were downwards in trajectory by 0.86 micrograms between 2017 and 2019. See section 3.4 of your report. This is slightly less than the national average of 1.8 micrograms UK during the same period. However, slightly increases in a small number of locations. These fluctuations are usually expected and can be caused for a variety of reasons, such as roadworks, etc. Overall, these changes are quite small. During the COVID period as well, we've noticed that particularly over the lockdown where people weren't using their vehicles at all, the city saw a reduction in levels of nitrogen dioxide by a factor of 22.4%. That's approximately 7 micrograms reduction in NO2 over the baseline levels that we expect to see in the city. That's noted in section 3.3 of your report. This compares quite favourably with the national average figure of down by 26%, 8.1 micrograms. So as you can see yourself, the city centre has followed a quite similar trajectory to the rest of the country. Section 3.7, 3.10 deals with the long term. And going to summarise this rather than go through the detail. We've been monitoring nitrogen dioxide for the city for around 20 years in total, in 37 different locations. Some of these locations have varied, but some of them we've maintained the same for the purposes of trending over a long period of time. And it gives us a really good picture as to what's taking place. Now, there's some good news in this respect, and that air quality is improving over that period. We've seen an overall reduction between 18 micrograms over the last 20 years in urban areas. National NO2 reduction for the same period is 22.4 micrograms. However, this reduction is less in urban background locations, which we would expect because there's less road traffic, around about 7 micrograms. These trends are mostly attributable, to improvements in engine technology through the Euro engine standard systems, with the exponential take-up in EVs as well. We should see a speeding up of this improvement over forthcoming years. These are mainly being sustained by national incentives and having an impact that we would normally anticipate, as it's seen in the rest of it. So the next steps that we need to take are seen in section 311, 312 and section 3.6. We largely cover the same ground. Following the COVID lockdown, which has delayed most of our air quality work by a period of nearly 2 years, we're now been in a fortunate position of seeing, conversely saying it's fortunate to see traffic levels being at what we would normally expect, which means we can being able to undertake a full assessment of traffic numbers throughout the city. Our colleagues at County Highways provided us with a full set of results on the 23rd of November. So the next steps that we will be taking is to undertake a source apportionment now, early in the new year. The source apportionment, right on my map, will give us an inside track as to the types of vehicles that we're seeing and the percentage of them. And with the air quality data that we have, will give us an indication as to the improvements that the council will need to make to bring air quality levels below objective levels, action levels, and to deliver it on a more sustainable footing. Because at the moment, relying on national incentives isn't enough, really. And that's something that the council will need to do when it comes to formulating its air quality action plan forthcoming months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Open to any questions.
Thank you for that. That's very constructive. Lloyd, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm nowhere near as clever as Richard, because I'm going to stay away from the science. But equally as importantly, I'm just going to update on where we are against the task and finish group recommendations. That group sat a couple of years ago. We've had a couple of reports that have reported back on those recommendations. But hopefully the report before members this evening goes into a bit more detail and reassures. So in respect to recommendation 1, considering air quality impacts when taking decisions, we believe this recommendation has been completed now, Chair. Obviously through planning and through regulatory regimes, air quality is a material consideration. Things like planning applications and WRS both act as a statutory consultee and as a regulator for us on that behalf. Looking at council's decisions, then our report format requires any report seeking a decision to take into account the environmental considerations, and that would include air quality. And report authors have basically a sort of a guidance document that encourages them to think in that way. And obviously all formal decisions are scrutinised by both the corporate leadership team and by members. And again, this report this evening for me sets the scene for us as officers and for members to scrutinise decisions moving forward. Recommendation 2, Chair, feasibility of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Again, I've mentioned at a previous committee, we actually commissioned a report some months ago to identify some of the key information that was required to better understand the need and challenges around on-street EV charging infrastructure. We've now received that report, and at 3.19, I've pointed some of the key headlines that have come out of it. Members, I'm sure, will also be aware that a recent County Council meeting, the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport agreed to look into the Council's options for delivering such infrastructure, whilst highlighting some of the challenges associated with such projects. So a positive move, but comes with a caveat. And obviously the data that we've now collected, what we want to do is to share that data with colleagues in highways and public health, so we can explore even further the opportunities around EV charging infrastructure, not just on the street, but also utilising other public space or car parks, perhaps even pieces of land that we own or sort of agencies with a stake in this own, to be able to utilise those if possible. That's an ongoing recommendation, Chair. We appreciate that. That's an ongoing piece of work. Recommendation 3, consider air quality around future proposals for parking. Again, the Environment Committee recently approved going out to consultation on a consolidated off-street car parking order for our new EV charging points. And as well as setting a competitive market tariff, we've also put in place a proposal to make rapid charging bays free for a maximum 1 hour stay to encourage uptake of those bays. 3.24 sets out the impact that has had, and to date, charge points have recorded 613 charging sessions, utilised by 340 unique users. And the stat that I find most pleasing, I suppose, is 15,000 kilowatt hours have been consumed. That totals 44,000 miles travelled. So those charging bays are being well used and are having an impact. We're also discussing with a local charging manufacturer around future opportunities for additional sites. But at the present time, Chair, given where we are with the pandemic and supporting local businesses, there are no intentions or proposals to look at fees or for officers to advise a change in fees. And for me, Chair, this recommendation, should be ongoing. It's very much day-to-day business for us now, and should be considered as part of taking decisions. Recommendation 4, which was around investigating feasibility of pool cars, and in particular ultra-low emission pool cars. And again, from memory, I've mentioned to the committee in the past that when we set out looking at this piece of work, it became very clear to us that as a sort of a reasonably small organisation, our grey mileage use was particularly low. We've got services such as WRS that sit outside of us, and those sort of traditional heavy mileage services. So we don't pick up that burden. And again, we're a very sort of compact city. So when we spoke to a national fleet company about the opportunities there were for putting in place a pool car system, the risk was that wasn't going to be cost effective, and we would have pool cars sat in our car park sitting idle because our business usage is just so low. However, Chair, positively, work continues to look at our own fleet of vehicles, and as of the date of this report, 8 vehicles we operate are fully electric, and they are set out at 3.30. And again, that recommendation is considered to be closed, Chair. Recommendation 5 was looking at the impact, feasibility and impact of an emission standard for taxis. Again, members of this group, some will have sat on the taxi strategy task and finish group. And I won't rehearse what we've already said at this committee. However, again, one of the key outcomes was that it was a far more complicated situation than just offering an incentive to drivers to move to electric. There are far more challenges than that. And one of the things that we want to do moving forward is to engage more actively with the trade. Now the taxi forum is up and running, just to really get under the skin of what those challenges are and to find out what it is we as a council need to do to properly incentivise and to encourage drivers to make the change when that time is right. So again, Chair, we've been through that process, and we would consider that recommendation to have been. And then the last recommendation, Chair, recommendation 6, was to draft a low emission strategy to include all the recommendations from the task and finish group. I've just set out in the report what we consider a low emission strategy to be, but as officers, we're just questioning whether that's something that we need to do or whether it needs to look slightly different. And one of the things I'm proposing, Chair, is for officers to meet with you and your Vice Chair, Councillor Stafford, and his Vice Chair of Environment Committee as well, to look at whether a low emission strategy is the right document for us, or whether it needs to be a different type of document, perhaps focused around electric vehicles as a sort of a better outcome for us as a council. So in summary, Chair, of the 6 recommendations, recommendation 1, 4, and 5 we believe have been completed, 2 and 6 remain in progress, And we believe 3 is deemed as ongoing and business as usual.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. That was very correspondent. I mean, reading from the report and between the double act, I think it shows that the progress is progress. So, I mean, that's before I open it up to members. Ideally, I think it was really needed to capture all this scenario. I know it's some of it's not been within our control, not meeting and not, but I think this sort of summarizes up. So I'm very grateful for both of you. Opening Andy, I've got looking around, Simon, James. I think that's Carol. Yeah, Andy, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just really want to sort of thank officers for the report, quite comprehensive, and certainly with the recommendations, there is a lot of overlap with what's happening within the Environment Committee, and certainly the Environmental Sustainability Strategy and Action Plan wasn't in place when the working group was first established, and now obviously there's sort of quite a lot of detailed specific actions within that plan, such as a low emission business travel, low emission commuting, active travel, just 3 of the 23 actions that are underway, which have obviously they're high level. There's lots of sub actions as well. So I certainly welcome the recommendation from Action 6 to look at how that can be best move forward.
James.
Chair, thanks very much. Just a very quick one of clarification, really. Paragraph 3.25, discussions are underway with the local charge point manufacturer. At what point do we anticipate that conversation will come back? Because, I mean, clearly understanding, as he says here, the habits of EV drivers, et cetera, it's quite important in getting this right. So I just wondered when that conversation might reappear at committee level.
Yeah.
Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Those conversations are ongoing, Councillor Stanley. So I'd like to think that by the next committee, we'll be able to bring something back to a committee for that to be discussed further. But I think the premise of the project is that a company would drop a couple of charging points into a destination and then use those charge points to understand people's behaviour in using them.
Thanks for that. I think Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's just a couple of points on. The first one is on recommendation 2, which is regarding the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. At the top of page 4, it says that based on the forecast, which I think forecast takes us up to 2031, so that's 9 years from now. We should have 420 public e-charge points. It would be nice if we could have some kind of annual target to meet, and I just did a quick calculation. Based on the fact that we've got 35 at the moment, that would mean we should be aiming at increasing that number by 43 years to meet that. Is it sensible for us to be looking at an annual target rather than trying to catch up lots in a few years' time? The other thing is recommendation 3. One of the things that we looked at in the task and finish group, and it was really encompassed within that recommendation. I know it's not really something we have direct control over as a city council, but it was really about the strategy for car parking in general. We did look at, I think it was Colchester, where they've had a strategy for removing car parking from the city centre systematically and encouraging it on the periphery of the city centre. And I wonder whether we've got any strategy along those lines. And clearly that's more in the hands of the county council, but as a city council, we can be quite powerful advocates for that sort of policy. But the examples that come to mind is we still have quite major car parking off Deansway and Queen Street, whilst we could perhaps be encouraging more the use of King Street off Sidbury or Croft Road. Are we looking into that and making our voices known along that argument?
Do you want to pick that one up, Lloyd, before we move on?
Yeah, Chair, just on the first point around charging points, I think it's a bit chicken and egg, so I think we've just got to get the balance right. So, you know, for instance, the statistics we've given for the charge points in St Martin's Gate, they've only all been used all at the time once. So I think we can invest an awful lot of time and effort into putting far more electric vehicle charging points in, but that effort is probably not going to be rewarded by cars sat there charging them. So I think you know, forecasting and profiling is a good thing. I think we just need to bear in mind that there's only so many electric vehicles on the road at the moment, and it's just balancing the time and effort against utilisation. In respect to the second point, Chair, I know some members will probably want to come in on this. Didn't go into it in the report, but you know, from an officer point of view, we have a city centre master plan. We have a lot of other strategies where car parking, city centre car parking is fundamental to that. So as officers, that's the direction of travel at the moment, and there are no further conversations at officer level going on that look to work against that.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thanks for that. I think I've got Carol next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of points, if that's all right. I was going to refer to the master plan as well, because I was at it last week when we were talking about particular places in the city centre that were particularly congested, and people said that the quality of space wasn't very nice because of the air. I'm hoping that you'll be somebody with your expertise from the 37 sites, that you'll be able to put some input perhaps into the evidence, if we've got that kind of feeling that will be fed back to the people. The other thing is the recommendation 4 that looked at pool cars. I was wondering whether a slightly different model could be looked at, whereby people don't use their own car for office work, and in fact it would just be a car that is rented short term. So that's for people then, say, who could cycle to work but then have to go out on office business, then be delivered to the office, that could then be used for the journeys. And those cars tend to be a lot newer and much less. And then the other thing is that I can see that you have, are monitoring lots of sites with for nitrogen pollutant, nitrogen dioxide, but no other pollutants are being monitored at the moment. And I was wondering whether you could see any benefit in doing that.
Lloyd, over to you.
Chair, if I just pick up point 2 first and then hand over to Richard for points 1 and 3. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, when we spoke to the fleet company, like I say, I think we are such low mileage users, then there wasn't, whether it was a rental option or whether it was a pool car sat that we sort of leased for a period of time, there just wasn't enough in it for us. So we've already got a number of electric vehicles on the fleet. So for instance, community engagement team, which are probably one of our highest users, you frequently see them out in the electric van. A lot of business is walkable. We have offices that bike. So we did sit down with a fleet company and look at our current mileage versus the benefits, and there simply wasn't a viable option for us to take forward. That's not to say perhaps in the future, but at the moment that wasn't the case.
Richard, do you want to pick up the other 2 points? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this brief, but it's a bit of a long drawn-out answer, I'm afraid. It would be useful if I explained a little bit about the. So for nitrogen dioxide, which we've got annual objective exceedances, the threshold for that is 40 micrograms. There's also standards for hourly exposure as well. So when you are looking at people in the street or spending time on the high street or where they're walking, you'll be looking at exceedances of the 150 microgram threshold. Air quality management has been going on for years and started monitoring. Memory serves me right, around about 96 when I started looking at it time ago. The rule of thumb is for nitrogen dioxide, if you have annual exceedances of over 60 in a location on a regular basis, there is a chance that you're going to be exceeding the hourly objective as well. That's the kind of level that we're looking at for monitoring for people spending time in a zone or street. Same applies for particulates as well, PM10. Annual objective for PM10 is 40 micrograms, and then you have an hourly exceedance which is set at 50. No, sorry. Yeah, 50, and that can be only exceeded at 35. Yeah. Now, our monitoring is done on an average basis because that's where we go over the threshold for the city. None of our monitoring has been done on a using a continuous analyzer. So we can't provide up-to-date, day-by-day information on the air quality. But coming back to the point on particulates, the background average for Worcestershire is around 13 to 17 micrograms. You know that from national modelling, and the current threshold for annual is 40. So generally across the board, we don't exceed.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm quite into going back to recommendation 2. We're talking about again this feasibility of electric charging in the streets. I've already had complaints from my residents about not being able to park anywhere near their streets. It's not something the council can provide. It is, as they said themselves, when they bought their houses, they knew that they didn't have parking nearby. But if you're trying to struggle with children and you're trying to now electrically charge your vehicle, and you've got to find that charging point. Earlier this year, we couldn't help but notice the arguing and the argy-bargying and the queuing and the fractiousness amongst people just trying to get fuel. We don't want that sort of future, people arguing over who's had that electric charging point and for long enough, and you don't need to charge, you can do yours somewhere else and stuff. So is it possible perhaps to get them pre-booked, the charging points, for instance, and also can we make sure that they are dispersed around the city? I don't know if we can perhaps get them from council facilities like the streetlights. Could they be built into something like that? Because a lot of people, including myself, we do not have the off-street parking facility to charge our vehicles. And it might also be that we perhaps ask householders that have got that, they might have bigger houses, bigger drives near that, and they might be prepared to host a charging facility for the city that's charged through the city, but that the facility is used near their place, so that if they've got to, get as many places out and dispersed as we possibly can. Otherwise, we could see in sort of like 6 to 7 years' time, when there's more electric vehicles, people starting to get fractures, and we just don't need that.
I can take that away, Chair. But one of the things that the study did, we sort of mapped those areas of the city where there was least off-street parking. So absolutely, any sort of strategy we set out on, with the county council as the lead authority, really, we would want to make sure that they're in the right areas. And in terms of the prepaid point, good point. I'm not aware, but I'll certainly take that back and speak to Ruth about whether that's an option for us.
We need a massive queue of people using it. Oh, we got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think it's Chris next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for the report. It's very useful. It's encouraging to see that air quality is improving slowly, which is great. I really wanted to come in on the parking. Our master plan, the city master plan, which is a joint across the party plan, does clearly state that we're not going to reduce parking numbers in the city. And that means for people with electric vehicles, we need them to be able to park in the city because we have to be able to support the businesses and tourism in the city. There is a clear policy on it, I think. And of course we are adding charging points. We've put them into the car park opposite Asda recently. But I think we also have to be aware that people who buy electric cars, which is all good, you have to understand if you buy it, you need to be able to charge it. So I would have thought people who are buying them would be doing so in the knowledge that they know where they can charge it, because there are limits to which the city council can influence and can act, because it's a highways issue. And I wish if I had a £330 million a year budget, I might be sticking charging points up and down the high street, but unfortunately I don't. I think we're moving in the right direction though, slowly.
Thank you, Chris. Andy, I think you indicated again.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make a couple of points. One, sort of Chris has already touched on, and that's to, just to be clear, a recommendation too looks at electric vehicle charging infrastructure on the streets, but that is very much in the domain of the county council and highways. It's their, it's their infrastructure. So most of this isn't an our gift, although obviously it's something we're incredibly interested in, and it's obviously going to be a huge challenge for the whole country, how we're going to charge all these new electric vehicles that everyone's going to be driving around in a few years' time, and there's going to have to be a huge amount of work and investment in lots of different solutions. So people are going to be charging at work, they're going to be charging at supermarkets, obviously in public car parks, and on street. I'm sure we'll be part of that, but it's there's obviously lots of investment and engineering challenges involved, and obviously the city council needs to play its role in that, but it's not a responsibility or even something the city council on its own can do, because it just simply doesn't own the infrastructure. So we need to look to county to lead on that. And the second point I wanted to make is that we do have a process now with the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, and it's been a lot of work and a huge amount of work, particularly by Ruth Correll here at the City Council, and part of that work is to make sure that we're pursuing the actions that deliver the greatest benefit, rather than sort of being pulled left and right with whatever's the best, the latest idea someone's popped up with. So I would ask if we have questions or ideas about how we can improve our environment. It is very broad-ranging, the action plan, and councillors have already all been invited to take part in the process of developing it. There's still opportunities to feed those in, but then at least it's part of a managed structure, and that we're not allocating time to activities that will deliver minimal benefit, because there is a finite amount of officer time available. There's a finite budget we can apply to these actions, and we want them to be focused on those that deliver the greatest benefit. So I would ask councillors to sort of use that method of if they have questions or want to float ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I think that's very useful. I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? Partnership working. And I'm sure the technology is going to be better and improved. So if people have some ideas, by all means, put them across. I think we've had enough, ladies and gentlemen. I think can we just, it's for noting, 1.1, 1.2, can we have the nods denoted? Yes. Oh, thank you. moving on very swiftly. I think the night economy, I think, oh my goodness, Warwick, kindly, hi Warwick. We haven't missed out. It's over to you. You're doing the best part of the night economy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me to present on a report which is managing the nighttime economy within Worcester City Centre. It's important to understand the term the nighttime economy, which is used to describe a wide range of activities from the trip to the theatre or family meal out or a night out at a club. Nighttime economy is an important part of our towns and cities and estimated to bring in over 60 billion in the UK economy every year. The vast majority of people enjoy a night out safely and sensibly. However, the nighttime economy can be associated with issues predominantly around alcohol, fueled violence and crime and antisocial behaviour, which often result in negative perceptions. At Council in November 2019, a motion was proposed in respect of the Union of Shop Distributive and Allied Workers, the Freedom from Fear campaign. The motion was subsequently approved and stated that every minute of working day, a shop worker is verbally abused, threatened with violence or physically attacked. Council therefore supports the USWAW Freedom from Fear campaign and requests that all Worcester residents respect shop workers. The council requests the managing director to work with Worcester Bid, West Mercia Constabulary and community safety teams to develop a strategy to reduce shop worker abuse. More recently, this committee has on multiple occasions debated the safety of nighttime economy, and following its last meeting, the chair of the committee requested officers to develop a report on the subject. This report intends to update members on the current and proposed work being carried out by the council in partnership with key agencies to ensure that the city is safe and well managed for those who use or work in the nighttime economy. So we've pulled together a bit of perspective from Worcester Regulatory Services and West Mercia Police. As this committee well knows, in 2020 approved a change to the community of impact area within the Worcester City Centre, reducing its footprint and focusing on certain types of licensed premises that contributed to many licensing related issues. The assessment that led to this decision showed that alcohol related crime between 2016 and 19 had year on year reduced within the area, and the peak days of incidents are Friday through to Sunday, with peak times being 11 to 5 o'clock in the morning. The Worcestershire Regulatory Services strategic assessment in 2019 and 20 confirmed that between the period of 2016 and 17 and 18 and 19, 63% of the total complaints, 299 in total, received across the county about licensed premises related to noise complaints compared to 30% relating to crime and disorder. 2/3 of complaints were linked to pubs and clubs, with 15% being linked to restaurants and takeaways. So and there's a comparative rate then in 2.9 between the various towns and areas in the county. And 2.10, with the information summarised above, does not suggest that the nighttime economy in Worcester is a particular concern, although it is reflective of Worcester City Centre that has a density of licensed premises that is enjoyed by many, particularly at weekends. The 2020-2021 strategic assessment is currently being finalised by Worcestershire Regulatory Services. The focus of this report is those who use the nighttime economy as well as those who work in it. So it's not just the users, it's the workers. Both groups, there's very clear responsibility on employers under the Health and Safety at Work Act to ensure, as far as reasonably practical, the health, safety and welfare of employees, and to ensure that employees and others are kept safe. This includes an obligation to ensure any potential risk of work-related violence is eliminated or controlled. Furthermore, the Licensing Act in 2003 conditions each and every licensed premises with a range of conditions relating to the 4 licensing principles. The responsible person must ensure that all licensing conditions are complied with. And as a local authority, we are the regulator for that license. Key issues identified are there are a number of existing forums and multi-agency meetings which cover either specific aspects of crime or a responsibility of overseeing the response to criminality for the business economy. two main, well, not the two groups that of particular importance are the South Worcester, the Safer Worcester Partnership and the South Worcestershire Serious Organised Crime Joint Action Group. The Safer Worcester Partnership meets 5 times a year and seeks reports based on crime and activity as a focus. One of the members is the representatives from the Worcester Business Improvement District, which has been in operation since April 2010. It's a non-for-profit organisation with the aim of improving the trading conditions for businesses who contribute to the bid levy. And the bid works hard to ensure that there's a welcoming presence for Worcester residents and visitors in the city and to combat antisocial behaviour, theft and other incidents of crime throughout the day and night. And it's within its strategy, it's a lot of priorities regarding the city safety initiatives, including the local delivery of the to reduce the city centre crime and fear of crime as a theme, and to reduce or to successfully implement a safe and secure environment. Worcester Bid contributes to Safe Worcester Partnership regularly, and there are joint projects in and around CityNet, Best Bar Non and Astra Angela. CityNet is the business crime reduction partnership, and it includes members of over 150 businesses across the day and nighttime economy. And it's all about sharing intelligence and coordinating responses to persistent offenders. There's a live radio communication between members and the CCTV control rooms and the police, which gives a coordinated response and live information of what's going on. It has of the 162 members on the network during 2021. They reported 106 instances. Best Bar Non is an accreditation scheme supported by the Home Office and drinks industry that aims to improve standards in the evening and nighttime economy. The bid promote the scheme with partners, and so far you can sort of see in 3.8 the various members of Best Bar Non that are accredited. There's going to be a relaunch of the Best Bar Non scheme early in 2022, alongside the Ask for Angela campaign, which is a partnership approach to provide a safe place for people to enjoy the evening, and it's a way of raising alarm discreetly if someone needs assistance in getting home safely. Over the last 3.12, over the last 18 months, West Mercia Police have reviewed how the nighttime economy in Worcester City Centre is policed. More of a problem-solving approach, where designated officers will visit premises between core hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And these officers are given specific tasks to complete, including licence checks on premises that have late-night refreshment licences or alcohol licences. And the officers are there to ensure compliance and education to make sure it's a safe place to visit and work in. And then also there's patrols, which include the licensed taxi ranks, as well as mobile patrols to respond to instances as and when they arrive. Alongside, there's a voluntary organisation called Worcester Street Pastors. These are uniformed volunteers with numerous local from numerous local churches, trained to patrol in Worcester City at night and providing assistance to those that are vulnerable. This can be in either providing appropriate footwear if people have hurt their feet, water for those people who need rehydration, thermal blankets, and sometimes we'll arrange transport home. And they're also first aid trained, just in case the needs arise. In 3.19, Worcester also operates a Safe Place scheme administered by Our Way. This is more of a daytime support for people who find themselves vulnerable during the day, and it's basically a safe place of refuge if they need it. Down in 3.20, referring to the two public space protection orders specifically relevant to this piece of work. One is the alcohol PSPO controlling drinking in public spaces, and the other is city centre PSPO, which includes feeding girls, dangerous cycling, skateboarding, but they also aggressive begging, which would be relevant to this piece of work. So the PSPO gives us powers to address those issues. And as mentioned previously, and in 3.22, there's the CCTV surveillance system that the City Council has jointly invested in, heavily invested, and through the CityNet radio can connect and can talk to both businesses, the CCTV control rooms in the Crown Gate and University, but also police officers, and that's monitored 24/7. In addition to that, this year, South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership was privileged to be awarded £500,000 from the Safer Street Fund, issued by the Home Office, to deliver targeted work to reduce violence against women and girls. The project is focusing on improving alleyway lighting and CCTV surveillance in specific locations, landscaping improvements to Cripplegate Park, looking at taxi marshals, looking at improving the look and feel of certain locations through paint festival approach. And also West Mercia Rape and Sexual Abuse Centre, the staff there are creating educational workshops and materials to deliver education in schools about positive relationships and how to report abuse. On the subject of abuse, the City Council is again very happy to host the Knife Angel that's coming in March 2022. The Knife Angel is the national monument to raise awareness of the impact of violence and aggression on communities and individuals. There's quite a heavy education, awareness raising package that comes along with that being developed by officers. There'll be the use of the cathedral for education. There'll be school visits, classroom activities, but there'll also be outreach into schools at assemblies. And that's also part of that package is extended to the nighttime economy staff who'll be included in with training provided as part of that and around nighttime economy and safety. And finally, Worcestershire Regulatory Services provide operational environmental health and licensing services on behalf of Worcester Council, and recently introduced a nighttime economy team, predominantly set up to look at enforcement and compliance on weekend evenings between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m. This is across the county, but obviously it's focusing in on intelligence, on public health, complaints received by WRS and Worcester Council, being briefed by the police on any issues being highlighted, proactive licensing enforcement, and there'll be joint visits with community safety teams, Worcester Bid and the police, looking at various premises based on intelligence, and there'll be tactical assessments. And between July and November, this team has visited 80 premises with almost 50 outcomes achieved via a range of informal and formal action. The environmental officers based within the health and safety team regularly visit Worcester's businesses in order to advise and assess their various work practices. Officers regularly undertake proactive out-of-hours inspection work and evening and weekends to check on whether businesses are operating safely in line with the relevant risk assessments. And then based on their assessments, they identify appropriate training and safeguards put in place. And that's obviously, if it's not complied with, there is formal action that can be followed up on to ensure compliance. Within WRS, as mentioned previously, with the community of impact policy, and the focusing on the smaller area, there's two types of license activity: vertical drinking establishments and late night refreshments between midnight and 5 a.m. This provides the business community with a clear message about the type of businesses that the council may find problematic in terms of growth, whilst at the same time indicating a willingness to positively consider applications that do not fall within this definition. This intends to send the message that the city wishes to see diverse development in its nighttime economy offer, so that those businesses operating to earlier terminal hours, or those that have alcohol as part of a broader offer, would be a welcome addition to the cityscape. In previous years, the council, along with other key agencies, including Worcester, BID and West Mercia Police, have been involved in discussions around an aspiration to apply for Purple Flag status. Purple Flag is an international accreditation program that aims to reward those who achieve innovative curation, planning and partnership to create a destination that can delight users after dark. Purple Flag strives to create safe and thriving locations at night for users. And there's various criteria for accreditation. The City Council with partners is looking to review this in the new year and is planning to bring a report back to this committee in the summer of 22 by way of an update on progress. The report sets out both the depth and breadth of multi-agency work being driven by the council's community safety team, including the West Mercia Police and Worcester BID, in respect of managing the nighttime economy of the city that is overseen by a range of groups, both strategic and operational. Many of the building blocks are already in place to ensure our city centres continue to be both attractive and safe for people to socialise and work, whilst also acknowledging that the previous 20 months has significantly impacted the hospitality and entertainment trade. Therefore, a balance needs to be maintained to ensure our city centre businesses can return to operating successfully without over-regulation or scrutiny where it is not required. And therefore, the recommendation is that, that the committee notes the contents of the report and work that's being undertaken, and notes the further work that is intended to be carried out in respect to the feasibility of submitting an application for Purple Flag status, and to report back in summer of 22.
Thank you, Warwick. That's very commendable. It's a very useful report, I think. Before I open up to members, I just want to pick up point that the Purple Flag. Where do they apply? Do they apply to the City Council, or do they apply to the BID or the Worcester Regular Services? Who the businesses?
So we would be part of it would be a partnership application. It wouldn't be individual businesses. It would be the City Council alongside the BID and other partners applying on behalf of the businesses. So it would be the equivalent of us achieving a green flag status or a blue flag beach, that sort of thing, but specifically for the nighttime economy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As you know, this has been an interest of mine for some time, and I thank you, Chair, for enabling this report to come to committee, and I thank Warwick for his excellent report, which is in front of us. It is a good report, but it does raise even more questions than someone's respond to. There is a considerable amount of concern from people who work in and use the nighttime economy in Worcester. It may be a case that some of that is more to do with fear than reality, but the reality is there is a lot of fear, and that needs to be tackled, and we need to do a lot of work to actually try and address that. I have a proposal for you, Chair, which I'll come to in a minute, but and I do like the idea of the application for the Purple Flag, and I think there needs to be a bit more member participation in that process to enable some scrutiny of how we move forward to it. But when I hear about people who work in the industry, who work in the nightclubs and work in the nighttime economy, they complain about issues such as noise, lack of breaks, poor pay, verbal abuse. They complain about lack of safe routes home. Often they're being challenged by people who they've actually dealt with in the establishment while they've been working, and they're challenged outside the working establishment by customers. There's also abuse of the taxi trade. People using their private hire vehicles and taxis on the way home, and sometimes doing so without paying, and threatening behaviour, often homophobic, often racist, often very nasty sometimes. And all these are issues which actually picture the economy in Worcester sometimes at the nighttime economy and cloud the picture to make it more difficult for people to enjoy their evening out. And we do have to remember we are a university city, a sub-regional centre for nighttime economy and for entertainment. And therefore, I do think we need to do a little bit more. I have a proposal which, if I can pass round, which is to enable us to support, as members, our officers, and I'll read it, that the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee establishes a task and finish group to consider the following: the safety and security of staff employed in the sector, what lessons can be learned from other local authority areas about how to improve safety and security for their employees, including the licensed private hire and Hackney Carriage drivers, issues surrounding safe routes home for users and those working in the economy, and arrangements with enforcement agencies to ensure a standard of safety and security for users and those employed in the nighttime economy, to work with Best Bar None and how to encourage more participation and awareness. If I may say so, it's noticeable how few establishments are on the Best Bar None list, and some of the establishments which should be there are not. And to consider what changes are needed prior to any application for the purple flag status. And that can report back to this committee with the report which Warwick has talked about by the summer of next year, with recommendations which we can take forward. I think this is a comprehensive opportunity for us to actually build the local economy, nighttime economy in Worcester, and to make sure it becomes an economy which is not only fit for purpose, but safe and appears to be safe as well. I would ask you, the committee, to consider my suggestion. Thank you, Chair, and I apologise for the croaky voice.
And Richard, that's fine. I've got Lucy and then I've got Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the very interesting report. I think we all read it quite thoroughly before the meeting. One thing which I would like to see dealt with is the responsibility that licensed premises for the safety of their customers. If your business is selling premises in a vulnerable, especially young girls leaving on their own, it seems to me that licensees don't recognise that it is their ability, you know, no less vulnerable than when they, and that the responsibility of those licenses extends beyond their. There have been instances where basically abandoned by the licensee on the doorstep and have to fend for themselves when they've clearly been in a vulnerable. I really think that we should be treating this breach of life.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm pleased that you said what you've just said, because I was wondering whether this is the right place to raise this, but it clearly is very much what you've just commented on. And I'm disgusted by this national trend that's emerging with young ladies having their drink spikes. It seems to be a huge problem in university towns and cities, and I fear it's a trend that's only going to go on the up. Perhaps it's something we as a committee could perhaps the officers could look at, whether we can have some discussions about how we can sort of factor in what to look out for with regards to maybe door staff, following on from, you know, taking your suggestion maybe another direction. But this does seem to be some sort of it's a terrible trend that seems to be developing. And so it's not just the safety, it's we have friends who might be dumped on a night out, but it's actually looking out for vulnerable people who actually, you know, had their drink spiked, and alarm bells, actually not just the staff, but actually some sort of public awareness. So, you know, if people are on a night out, they can sort of, we're all out enjoying ourselves, and we can all perhaps do a bit more to keep our eyes open to keep the safety of fellow residents at the forefront of our minds.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know the town that Councillor Udall refers to. I frequent the nighttime economy, as do my daughters, and neither they nor their friends or myself has ever heard of anyone calling it fear. So I'm sure if people are telling him that, that's what it is, but that's not the city that I know and frequent regularly on a weekend. So I must be going to different parts of the city, but I struggle with that. And the report I heard didn't paint the picture that has been painted by Councillor Udall either. So it would be, if he can substantiate that, then that would be of use, because it's hearsay at the moment, and it's not what I see when I'm in town. And I also think we have to be very careful in terms of licensing. We give people licenses to run their establishment. If they are in breach of that license, great, and I'm all for getting them in and sanctioning them. But we can't impose additional responsibilities that are not within their license. Most public owners or licensed establishments do tend to look after people who are vulnerable. That's why they have door staff late on the evening, and we'll see people. But we can't impose things upon them that don't sit within their license. We can give education, we can give advice, and we can talk to people and try and improve things. But there is a limit to the licensee's license. Literally, when the person leaves their premises, they are no longer responsible for them, in theory. Now, a good licensee, if someone is inebriated or in problem, would help that person or make sure they leave their premises well. But once they're off of it, that's not their responsibility. And well, I think we come to a grey legal area, and I look to the legal advisor, of where we're going, because we have to be careful what we're trying to achieve here, because we might be setting ourselves up for a massive failure. The police are there for a very good reason. So I get cautious or nervous when we try and overstep the bounds of this committee.
Thank you, Chris. That was very helpful. Richard, I'm sorry, I haven't got a second. I've pulled three names, but you haven't given me.
Well, I haven't actually proposed anything yet. What I've asked is for a discussion about my suggestions. But I've heard what's been said by members present, and I agree that the issue of drink spiking should be an issue which should be considered within the report. As I understand it, there have been very few incidents reported to police in Worcester about drink spiking, if any. But I think the national fear, which has been talked about it does want some further investigation. And Chris Mitchell, sorry, yeah, I do talk to a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of students, particularly who we both represent in St John's and in St Clement's, who tell me that their biggest fear is a safe route home. That's the biggest concern which they express. And that includes people who work in the nighttime economy and use it. And the concern about that is real and is fundamental. The other issues which they have, I have mentioned, but the biggest fear is that safe route home. And of course, we can't impose things which legally we can't impose. I wouldn't suggest otherwise, but I work towards best bar none and a voluntary code of conduct and a voluntary charter to enable our entertainment industry in Worcester to take part and sign up to something. When we have best bar none and very few establishments are actually taking part in it, that does worry me, it does concern me. And if we're going for purple flag status, we need to improve what we're doing, make sure that it's seen to be safe, it feels safe, not just as a perception of safety out there. So I would ask members to, if it helps, Chair, I will formally propose that we do take forward my proposal to the next stage and establish a task and finish group, and I'm more than happy to look and compromise about the issues concerned, and I suspect we need another report back to committee to establish it, and to enable its terms of references to be approved. But I would certainly like us to move in that direction so we can have proper member participation in the process towards the establishment of purple flag status.
Richard, I've got other speakers, I'm afraid. You jumped the queue, but so I've got James and Andy. James?
Chair, thanks very much. Excuse me. I mean, the report itself illustrates a fundamental point, which is that if we are to build a vibrant and successful nighttime economy, people want to feel safe, no matter where they come from, what ages they are. We're talking about reconfiguring certain parts of the city centre, which will bring, I very much hope, many, many more people into our city centre. And that's to be applauded. No one should feel endangered when they go out in the evening, and much of it is perception, but perception is as dangerous as reality in many respects. That said, I think we have to be extremely careful about approaching matters of law in such a vague and ill thought out way. If we are going to make changes, or at least propose things that affect a licensee's ability to do their job, then we need to be much more rigorous on how that is proposed and actually brought into practice. I've not heard anything so far that doesn't fill me with a great sense of foreboding about when we start to tinker with things like that, because these are very, very serious matters. And if we're saying that a licensee is responsible for what, a couple of feet or 10 feet, 20 feet, I mean, where does it end? This has to be, if it is to mean anything in law, that has to be thought through in a really rigorous way. And I've not heard anything so far. But safety of people using our nighttime economy, absolutely 100%. But be very careful about when we delve into the minutiae of law.
Thank you, James. I'm very pleased to say Worcester's the safest place. Lucy, you next then. I've got you, Andy.
Thank you.
I've got you.
At the meeting I attended last week about the bid, there was quite a bit of discussion about the nighttime economy and the fact that best bar none, they're going to relaunch in the new year. And they also talked about purple flag status. And I know that I think they've engaged with, I think, Niall about about how they're going to go ahead and do it in the new year. And certainly I've said that they need to engage with WRS around this. And I think that certainly the nighttime economy is very much engaged in this, and so I think it's a really good project, but I'm not quite sure if it's a task and finish panel or actually it's actually the nighttime economy that actually needs to almost drive it rather than here.
Andy?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we all want safe cities, safe nighttime economy, and did a very comprehensive report which sort of shows you how many different bodies and agencies and volunteer groups, initiatives are involved, as well as obviously very much the City Council. Clearly the report's got recommendations for further action, and Councillor Udall's put together a suggestion, which he spent some time on, but I don't think he went as far as sharing it with the Chair prior to proposing it this evening. I imagine there's a lot more information behind this report than that written down. And my personal preference would be that any further actions, whether it is a route which could potentially delay some that have already been specified in the report, could be through dialogue between the chair and vice chair and officers to determine what's appropriate and what will give us the best way forward, rather than a proposal that's been foisted on us this evening.
Yeah, about the responsibility that licensees have. We already have suggesting requirements on licensees. The vast majority of licensees observe the licensing objectives. I think it would be helpful, I'm just explaining to the committee licensing objectives and how we can deal with failure. Of the line. And perhaps does extend to the using a particular premises for the whole evening, how far leaving, for instance, my thinking would be, it would be perfectly reasonable actually to go. Perhaps if you can explain that.
Thank you, Chair.
Chris, before I call Vanessa, Karen, you've got.
I don't know if we're aware of this, but Gloucester and Cheltenham, the police, in conjunction with of their town, they've been working on something called Bike Aware. Yeah, and they've been out this last weekend, police with members of the licensing committee, just there as observers, and they've been offering free spiking swabbing for people who think they have been or are suspected of being spiked, just to monitor the situation and to be out there and be seen. People, you will be caught because it will be watched, the CCTV. If you've done this, not necessarily actual drink spiking, I think you've been pricked with one of these spike tests, then immediately swab you. They were very pleased with the way that the campaign had gone. Doing anything? West Mercia?
Thank you for that. Thank you. Before I call Chris, Lloyd, do you want to answer that
Chair,
one?
thank you. As a resident of Tewkesbury, I picked that up in the local press, and I think the beauty of the setup we've got now is that with WRS's nighttime economy, with the proactive role the police are playing in the nighttime, something we can certainly take back and discuss with officers. I know they've had a number of quite significant cases in Cheltenham that drove that. I'm not sure whether that's the same in Worcester, but again, proactively, it's about getting ahead of the curve. So we will take that back and discuss it.
They're just going to move their business.
Chris.
The focus is on student safety. So I'm on the university community forum, and only 2 years ago, the university put on a free bus to bring students home, but unfortunately, it wasn't used. So So I think the university, if we're going to talk, if it's university focused, then there's a role that the university have to play in this. But they did fund a free nighttime bus for a year, and they took it out of service because it wasn't being used by the students. So that was free as well. So, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I've just been advised by my left here that the bid's already in that situation. They've done it for 2 weeks, so they're already on to that. Thank you for that, Lucy. I think that concludes all the members. Vanessa, you want to come in with this? You're eager to sort of explain out some of the old members who've been sitting. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to deal with the matter that Councillor Cronin raised and also Councillor Mitchell, I think it's very important that members are aware that the Licensing Act is very prescriptive of where conditions can be imposed. And when you as a licensing authority, whether either delegated or through a committee, grant a licence, it will come with any conditions that are relevant and proportionate, bearing in mind evidence related to that specific premises. And I think what you're talking about tonight is very much more a holistic nighttime economy rather than a specific premises. And there is no line that you could ever draw at a front door or 3 feet from the front door. You could never impose that against a license, because the Licensing Act would not, that's not what the Licensing Act is designed to do. So what you're looking at is very much the bigger picture rather than targeting individual premises. When an individual premises is a cause for concern, and that will normally be something that's brought to the attention of the licensing officers by the police, by the bid, by reference to complaints that are made, then the officers work with the different agencies, such as the police primarily, to work with the premises to improve the standard of service that they provide. And if it comes a point where there is still a problem, and it is usually around crime and disorder, where there is still clear evidence that there is trouble that's emanating from a certain premises, and that licensee can be brought before the subcommittee, the licence can be reviewed, and that licence can be reviewed either with no action, with more stringent conditions, with changes to licensing hours, or that licence can be revoked. So you have actually a large stick with which you can beat a licensee who does not comply with the licensing conditions. But what you cannot do is impose a generic condition on all licence holders to say, well, you have a responsibility now beyond that within your premises. And I think what you're talking about tonight is education. Quite clear some of the comments that have been made about the fact that there is a bus that's available, maybe it's in the wrong place. There is very much a need to educate. And the police, and I know that the regulatory services officers work really closely with those multi-agencies to get that message out there. I haven't seen the proposal that's been put before members tonight, so I can't, without seeing, I can't comment on any legal implications that may be there. But it's about educating. And it may be that feeding all of this into the agencies that Warwick is dealing with and the Reg Services are dealing with is the way to get the message out there. But I'm going to ask you to exercise considerable caution before considering anything in relation to individual premises, because that sits fairly and squarely with you as members of the licensing. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Vanessa. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I think most members are on that page, but that's very accurately expressed. Richard, I'm going to give you the last word, and then I'm going to close.
I will withdraw my proposal, but I'll replace it with something else on the basis of what I've heard. And I totally agree with what Vanessa said, and I don't think anybody would have suggested otherwise. And we would clearly be told if we were touching on illegality in any meeting, and would be prevented from doing so. So I've got no concern about that whatsoever. I think there is a feeling around this meeting room tonight, around the Assembly Hall, that we need to do something to actually improve the message to the public about what we're doing within our nighttime economy, and we need to actually improve the communications and what we're doing to actually improve the society as which we're dealing with. I would suggest that we do bring back a report to our next meeting on a task and finish group, which could be established to support the application for a purple flag application, to work with our officers to establish an application and jointly bring back a report with them, as has already been discussed, into the summer of next year, which will enable an application to come before the committee, which would have member participation ingrained within it, so we would know what was actually being talked about.
Thank you, Richard. Just for your information, you didn't get a second for the first one. Now you got a, so I'm afraid it wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. It didn't have a great deal of air. I've asked, I know they're doing it now because I've just spoke, but I've went right round the room for every person. Nobody seconded your suggestion or your motion. So that debate wouldn't have taken place anyway. That's one. I'm sorry, Richard, I've given you plenty of time, so please bear with me. Are we going to keep...
I've withdrawn my proposal and I've put forward another one, which has now been seconded.
Where is the other one? Where's your other one?
I've just suggested it, Chair, that what we do is we ask our officers to bring back a report to our next committee to establish a task and finish group to support our officers in the establishment of a purple flag application in the summer of next year. So members can work with our officers to make an application.
We proposed it and seconded. We'll debate it. We'll debate your motion and task and finish. Who's up for, sorry?
Hey, I'm not sure, perhaps the officers might like to actually describe what the purple flag is, because I'm not quite sure what it is, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the actual, it's each establishment come forward with it rather than a sort of a council. I'm not sure.
Lloyd, do you want to come in?
Either Lloyd or... Yeah.
Chair, thank you. The report sets out what purple flag status is, and I think Warwick described it quite nicely. It's the equivalent of blue flag for a beach and green flag for a park. So basically, it would be a coordinated bid, probably led on by the City Council or the bid or collaboration, and that basically sets out to achieve purple flag accreditation. It would be for the city centre. It wouldn't be for one particular premise. Collaborated bid that basically tried to sort of put over and reassure people that Worcester City Centre was a safe and enjoyable place to visit. That sounds particularly simple, but there's lots of information that sits beneath that. One of the things from experience with purple flag status is it's a lot of work, and sometimes an area can think they're pretty close to submitting a bid, but actually in reality they can be quite some way away, and part of the process would be to invite purple flag organisation down to walk around the city with us, to look at our documents, to look at our process, to talk to our partners, and that is part of the feasibility work. And what we wanted to do and what we're recommending as part of this report is that we bring a report back to members at some stage next year that sets out to members how close we are. Now, Chair, I think the other thing to say is that without that information, I am not in a position to advise on whether a task and finish group is a good thing or a bad thing, but there's a process laid out within this report.
Thank you, Lloyd. As I said when I was speaking to you, that we need BID and other organisations who are already working on this. Let's have some information back. Every time we mention something, we're going to have a task and finish group. Andy, you want to come in?
We've already got a report that officers have spent a huge amount of time collating, and it's got a recommendation in there of an action, together a feasibility study on achieving purple flag status to bring back to this committee summer. Task and finish groups, they might make us feel good as councillors and be involved, but they take up a huge amount of officer time, a significant amount of officer time. And my concern would be that if we have a task and finish group, we all feel good because we're involved, but we just distract officers from an action which they've, which is one we all, I want to talk about anyone else, but I think we all think is a good one, and it's the one that they've highlighted and that's come out of this very comprehensive report. So my view is that we stick with the report that's been presented to us, allow officers to do their job, and it doesn't mean that we can't have updates. It doesn't mean we can't get a brief, but we don't distract them with the task and finish group, and that's my view.
Yeah, I agree with Andy on this. I think page 7 of 36 quite contented that the issue of participation board within this report is an look into it. An undertaking already to report back by summer of next. So I meant that this is already within.
I agree with Andy again. I think, but my concern is we're actually, by creating more work, we're actually delaying what we're all trying to achieve, but coming from different angles on here. And obviously it won't surprise you that the last thing I'm going to go for is even more regulation. However, I would like, I'd like to reinforce what I said about public education. And I think it's something that we can do with partner agencies with West Mercia. I think that's something constructive we can take away. Everybody in the room seems to be in agreement with concerns on this issue. Perhaps it's something we can take away from this meeting without delaying the work that's already been put in, the huge amount of work that's already gone into this. And it's something that perhaps we're 2 weeks from Christmas. We've missed the boat for an anti-spiking campaign in and around to Christmas. We're coming into January, February, traditionally quiet times in the nighttime economy. So perhaps it's something we can be looking at for the spring and give us something to focus on going into next year.
Yeah, and on the 25th of November, Karen and myself and several other members of this council attended the Reclaim the Night event. It was a peaceful protest, but it was basically there I met with a number of people who feel not very safe out on our did ask the organizer if she could let me know if she gets any reports, because she's a person that they speak to. Would the committee welcome that sort of information to them? And if they can then focus on, if we find a particular establishment name is coming up, them to improve their performance, the way that they are seen by the public.
I mean, I know Richard's proposed and got a second, so we've got to take it to vote, I'm assuming. Richard, unless you're withdrawing again.
No, I just think it's a shame that members don't think they can have a role in participating in supporting our officers in establishing a purple flag application. I suggest you just put it to the vote and defeat me that way, Chair.
I'm going to ask for a vote anyway for the Richard's task and finish. Voting against and for what? All right, I'll take it 4. 3, 4, against. 7. Thank you. It's lost. Noted. Thank you. Oh, Richard, you give me some. What am I? I've lost my bearings now. No, that brings nicely the gambling. I like a bit of no. Don't hold me to that. Gambling establishment. You got loads of them. Down to you now.
Chair, members. It's always nice when I've only got the 2 last reports. And the first 2 hours hasn't been me speaking, so I'll try and be as brief as I can, but making sure that it's worthwhile. No. So we're on to the Gambling Act 2005, review of the statements of principles, consultation results. So members, as you're aware, Worcester City Council is the licensing authority in accordance with the provisions of the Gambling Act. So each licensing authority is required before each successive 3-year period to review their gambling statements and principles. The statements and principles are exactly that. It's how the local authority approaches its responsibility towards gambling and its gambling function. So the statements of principles is a guide. It is guidance for operators, members of the public, elected members, and it also gives details about how we administer our function when it comes to gambling. The council's current statements of principles took effect on the 31st of January 2000. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, we are duty bound to review it and bring it back to this committee. On the 14th of June, members of this committee reviewed the draft statement of principles for the purposes of consultation. That statement of principles had only minor changes because the majority of changes took place in 2019 or 18, sorry, when it was reviewed originally and where there were some comprehensive changes to that document. Members approved the document for consultation with key stakeholders, and I'm pleased to say that consultation has taken place and the results are contained within the report. People who we consulted with are also contained, all the details within the report, those being the police, the Gambling Commission, other responsible authorities as identified in the Act, and local organisations, elected members. The list is in there. The consultation ran for 6 weeks until the 6th of September, and during that period, only 2 responses were received. First response was received from a very respected solicitors, Goschalk solicitors, and that was submitted on behalf of their clients, who is the Betting and Gaming Council. A full copy of that response is attached to your report, and it's fairly detailed. In that response, there were two recommendations. The first of all, they asked that we amend certain wording or a reference to significant number of problem gamblers. Court officers have looked at this. And again, this is subjective. This has been to other councils. Some people think that 0.5% is high, and some people think that it's low when it comes to problem gamblers. As officers, we took the opinion that 0.5% is quite high. You know, as the number of gamblers, people with gambling problems in a population, those that actually gamble. So we're going to keep it in our statements, of course, unless there is any opposition. But what we did concede is obviously certain wording, which they highlighted, which was brought out in recent guidance in relation to the primary gambling activities, just simple wording that's taken place in the draft policy, which we've now amended, and the draft that you have has the amended version in there. We also received a consultation response from Gamble Aware, and again, it's attached. Whilst Gamble Aware didn't actually make recommendations in relation to our gambling policy, they brought forward useful tools for us to look at when exercising our function and our responsibilities. So it was a welcome response, albeit one that we haven't needed to amend our policy. So the preferred option, councillors, is for you to, having looked at the responses, to approve the draft policy which you have before you and recommend to council that it be adopted and published. The legal and governance implications are contained within the report. Likewise, financial and budgetary was undertaken with consultation exercise within resources allocated to WRS. So those are the matters before you. So it's really open for discussion. If there is any, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Niall. That's very good. Now open it up to members. And got Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand that in August, I think it was, the Gambling Commission produced a report suggesting a number of changes to the gambling legislation. I'm just looking at some of them in front of me, but they're talking about features which would to speed up play or give illusion of control over the outcome and things like that. Are we any nearer to knowing if there's going to be any new legislation which will change the rules and law regarding gambling, and whether our responsibility as a local authority will change as a result of any law changes which are about to be induced?
No, nothing's been brought forward to officers. As part of the consultation, we did discuss our policy with the Gambling Commission. We are on very good speaking terms with the manager, certainly the regional manager and the senior manager, and they haven't raised anything with it. Members will always be aware, should be aware of the change in stakes probably 2 years ago, which reduced the amount that people can gamble, had quite a significant impact on people gambling in betting premises, so much so that betting premises started closing because that reduction in stake actually had such an impact on their business that they couldn't viably continue. Some people see that as a good thing, some people see it as a bad thing. Again, it's fairly subjective and it divides opinions. So we haven't had anything directly from the Gambling Commission, but when we do, we will certainly bring it forward for members.
Thank you. And very briefly, if I can add another supplementary to that, one of the campaigns which I regularly see is campaign to reduce advertising for gambling, specifically in and around gambling establishments, which may be seen by children or other people. I'm assuming the legislation does not allow us to have any influence or say over such things, and that's purely out of our control and is an issue for government rather than for local authorities. Is that the case?
That is correct, but it is monitored fairly stringently by the Gambling Commission. They've taken action with a number of the big operators around irresponsible promotions, around irresponsible gambling, encouraging people to gamble more or more than they can afford. So I'm aware of a number of campaigns where some of the bigger gambling companies have been called to task and actually fined for some of their advertising that they put forward. But you're right, as a local authority, we are limited on what action we can take around advertising.
Yeah, do you want, yeah, for
Sorry,
approval.
it's for approval.
All for? Looks unanimous. Any against? Yeah, all for you. Thank you for that. No, you're not going to go away yet. We've got another one. Fees and charges. Oh, sorry. Technology.
Chairman, members, the next report is the Licensing and Environmental Health Fees and Charges 2022 to 2023. Part of the legal agreement with the formation of Worcestershire Regulatory Services, licensing remains a reserved matter. So what does that mean? It means that all of the policy, decision-making, as well as fees and charges, setting, and the income generation remains the responsibility of this council. It's the role of the council to review and set its licensing fees and charges on an annual basis, which is why this report comes every year to this committee in December for you to look at your licensing fees and charges. The licensing office works very closely with the finance office to make sure that the fees and charges are set at such a level so that they cover or recover the costs for the administration of your licensing service and your regulatory service. This review has taken place by the licensing manager and the corporate director, and also the finance officers, senior finance officers. And the proposed licensing fees and charges are attached to the one. The details of such are that the recommendation is that there will be no increase to fees and charges within the remit of this committee. So that's the licensing fees and charges. a number of regulatory fees and charges. You will note, however, there are one or two slight increases to your dog control function. Again, part of it is in relation to your regulatory services, and some of them are actually commercial services, where you'll see one of the larger increases. It sort of stands out in an appendices which has absolutely no increases, and then one of them just sticks out. So that has been reviewed and is on a full cost recovery basis. So there has been a need to increase it to such a level. When reviewing the fees and charges, the licensing manager looks at all of the income and consults with the finance office to look at cost centres to make sure that the licensing fees and charges are covering the cost of the service. We're pleased to say that they are, and that the council is in a position not to raise fees and charges, which hopefully we see as some way of supporting licence holders and local businesses. Certainly for another year. I think last year was the same. We put fees and charges on hold because of the pandemic. This year we're in a position where again we will put them on hold and put forward no fees and charges. Again, the financial and budgetary implications and legal governance is in the report. It's worth noting lots of the fees are statutory and out of the control of this committee anyway. But where we do have a duty is to advertise fees and charges, if we increase them, is in relation to your Hackney Carriage and private hire functions. As we're not proposing an increase, there will be no need for us as a licensing authority to publicly advertise those fees and charges. They're only advertised when there's an increase. So members, you're asked to consider your fees and charges and recommend that they be included in the council's budget and put forward as part of the report to full council. Happy to answer any questions.
Very frank-handable. But Lucy first. Yes. Lucy,
I just want to just delve a little bit deeper. Social animal services, and just check that it is the right.
Yes, there has been a full review. The commercial animal services, whilst included in your fees and charges, isn't actually a Worcester City charges, so the fees and charges don't come back to this. But they're being included in this report for completeness, because those fees and charges are advertised by way of Worcestershire regulations. The one that stands out, as you can see, is the dog training facility. I think that it was set at a fairly low level originally. It's only been in place for 2 years, and this is the first opportunity that officers have had to fully review it, which is why it's had to be increased. There was a justification, and I had it earlier, about the officer time, amount of time it takes, number of hours. Haven't got it with me at the moment, but I can confirm that yes, it is just.
And so is it not even a Worcester City? It's not. So it's not something in Worcester City.
It's a service that's offered by Worcestershire Regulatory Services.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks, Leila. I raised the same issue, Councillor Hodgson. What I'm told is it's a commercial charge applied by WRS rather than a charge applied to a resident or service user of the city. So, as Niall says, even though it appears in this document, it's almost a fee that sits outside of the council's charges.
Chair, earlier this evening, we heard from taxi drivers that they're struggling because their fees haven't gone up. I notice our fees and charges to them haven't gone up, which is good and appropriate in current conditions. But I would like to know when we're next due to review what they're allowed to charge customers, so that we can see. No, if they were asking for 5% just to be able to feed their families, basically. And I'd like to know when we're going to be reviewing that and what we can do in that regard.
Chairman, you happy for me to reply? Yes. We're talking about the Hackney Carriage fare charge. Is certainly we heard from a member of the trade earlier, a member of the association. It is a fee. The charge is set by the local authority. We have responsibility to set our fees and charges for our residents when travelling in taxis. Now, in reality, they can come forward at any time, put forward a proposal for an increase in their Hackney Carriage fares. This is the trade themselves. And historically, that used to happen quite a lot. We had good links with some of the reps who came forward, but for some reason, even though it's been discussed, it comes down to individual points of view. Obviously, now we've heard from a representative of the trade who said that it's appropriate for the fees to go up. We've had a meeting, an open taxi forum meeting. Unfortunately, the person who's here today wasn't at that meeting. And I effectively told them, you were present, that yes, we are more than open to any formal proposal which is being put forward. It's down to the trade to actually come forward with a reasonable proposal, because they are the individuals who know how much their insurance costs, they know how much their running charge, they're running their vehicle costs. So they would come to us to then review and put forward to this committee. We've had those conversations and I've asked for that proposal to come forward. Obviously, when Mr. Sajed put forward his right to speak, I informed him of this because he wasn't present. Hastily put an email forward with a proposal which I think he's expecting to put forward. I've informed him of the process. There is a formal process. We have to, first of all, put that proposal together in a report for this committee for you to consider. But that can be done on an annual basis if you wish. It can be a standing item where it can come back every year, just as a local authority. But we would err against that and put it to the trade. It's for the trade to come and tell us how much they feel that should be increased, and then for you to consider whether it's justifiable or not.
Thank you, Jenny. Simon, I've got, and then.
Well, most of what I was going to Isla's very comprehensively answered, because I was actually considering asking Chair about adding an AOB that just the merits changed. Not that you've taken the wind out. So thank you very much for all of that. Apart from that, I did want to say that charge fees. Piling on the misery. Very pleased. We're not. Hope that will be recognition. We, yes.
Thank you, Simon. I mean, Niles and I was there, and Lloyd was there. We tried to explain all this to the members who were there, that annually they can put an application in, and it's up to the members to review. I think hindsight is that it's individuals. It is in the onus of the drivers, because if they increase the fare so much, nobody's going to use the vehicle. So I think they're being impartial to say they must not, be too hampered. But obviously the insurance and the petrol's gone up, so therefore we look at that when they put the application in. James, I've got you.
Yeah, it's just a question really, as a new councillor. Do the people who speak, because you have different speaking, you have a couple of representatives from within the trade. Is it very diverse? Is there one particular group that speaks on behalf of the whole trade? Or is there a different view amongst the different taxi firms and Hackney carriage drivers, independents? If we are going to be asked to put prices up, does the majority of the trade support that, or will some people be very, very concerned by that?
Thank you, James. I think it's a long-winded process, but I'm going to get the expert to explain to you rather than myself. But anyway, Niall.
Yes, we have a taxi association. And the two gentlemen who were here earlier are members of that association and report to speak on behalf of a number of drivers who are licensed. We have somewhere in the region of 340 licensed drivers. And as individual, they are license holders. So that in reality, they all have a voice, which would be impossible if we had 340 proposals coming forward, which could happen because everybody has their own view. So what we like to do is get a collated response of what we would like to think is a suitable proposal being put forward on behalf of their members. Why we recognise the Worcester Taxi Association as the association which we can put forward that proposal.
And that gets advertised, and there's a number of avenues it has to go through. I think I had Richard last.
I don't want to rehearse a potential future debate which we're going to have if an application has been received, but I would stress that our priority should and must always be with the passenger bay and public rather than the drivers themselves. I accept that people need to make a living, but I also accept that the majority of people who we are responsible for are looking to us to make sure that their rights are protected as consumers. My question was not about that. It's about the dog training facility welfare assessment check and the increase in charge, which is included there. Can I see clarification what that actually means? Does it mean the person who's operating a dog training scheme in a town hall, village hall or community centre somewhere, or is it more complex than that?
No. I queried this with Mr. Cox, Chair, and I think because these establishments need to be, get the terminology wrong, Councillor, either licensed or approved by the Kennel Club, and this service, I think, allows a service to be provided by WRS where they come in and do that sort of pre-assessment, tell them whether they're on the right track or not.
We've been asked to note this. Can we? Richard, that's not. Richard never gets confused. Anyway, can we go back to the recommendation? It's 1.1 and 1.2. We've been asked to this or recommended. Noting, agreed? Yeah. Thank you. I don't have any other business, so therefore I record it. Conclusion. Thank you very much for your intentions. Well done.